Listen to me very carefully. This is not background noise. This is not another video. This is a divine interruption. If you feel a sudden heaviness in your chest right now, if your heart is beating faster, if something inside you is saying, "This is for me," it is because heaven is calling your name. You did not click this by accident. God is sounding an alarm over your soul, and He is doing it now before it is too late. There is a war you have been fighting in silence, smiles on the outside, but battles in the secret place. People see strength, but God sees exhaustion. You have prayed, but your prayers started to feel empty. You have believed, but your faith has been bleeding. And tonight, Jesus steps into your room and says, "I see you. I know where you are, and I did not forget you." Some of you are at the edge, not the edge of quitting life, but the edge of quitting faith. You still say the right words, but your heart whispers, "How much longer?" You still lift your hands, but your soul feels numb. And the enemy has been telling you, if God really loved you, this wouldn't hurt like this. That lie ends now. Right now, if you feel the Holy Spirit stirring you, type Amen in the comments as a sign that you are listening and you are open. There are things you never told anyone, nights where you cried quietly so no one would hear, moments where temptation felt stronger than your resistance, seasons where sin didn't look dangerous, it looked comforting. And yet every time you walked away from God, you felt emptier than before. That is because sin promises relief but delivers chains. Jesus is not standing before you with anger. He is standing with wounds in His hands, saying, "I paid for that already." The guilt you keep punishing yourself with, He already carried it to the cross. The shame you replay in your mind, He already bled for it. But hear this clearly, grace is not permission to stay bound. Grace is power to be set free. Some of you are trapped in cycles. The same sin, the same regret, the same promise to never do it again. You ask God for forgiveness, but deep down, you stopped believing you can change. That is not humility. That is hopelessness disguised as honesty. The same Jesus who forgives also delivers. He does not just clean the wound, He heals it. If you want freedom, comment, "Jesus, I surrender," right now. I feel this strongly. There are people listening who are carrying wounds from betrayal. You trusted someone, you gave your heart, and they broke you in ways you still don't have words for. You say you forgave them, but the memory still has power over you. Jesus says, "Bring me what still hurts." Forgiveness is not pretending it didn't hurt. Forgiveness is releasing it from controlling you. Some of you stopped dreaming because disappointment taught you to expect loss. You don't hope big anymore because you're tired of being let down. But God says the enemy didn't steal your future, only your expectation. And expectation can be restored. What died was not the promise, only your strength. And God is a restorer of strength. You have been surviving, but Jesus is calling you back to living. Not religious living, not routine prayers, real fire, real intimacy, real surrender. The kind that costs you your pride, but gives you peace. If this message is touching something deep, type, "Lord, restore me." Hear me now. Time is shorter than you think. Not to scare you, but to wake you. Comfort has made many believers sleepy. Distraction has silenced conviction. And the Spirit of God is calling His people back to holiness. Not fear, but fire-filled obedience. Some of you know exactly what God asked you to let go of, and you didn't. You renamed it. You justified it. You delayed obedience. And every delay has been draining your joy. Partial obedience is still disobedience, but today, mercy is speaking louder than judgment. Jesus is saying, "Come back to your first love." not to the version of faith where you just attend, but the version where you burned, where you prayed because you wanted Him, not just answers, where worship wasn't rushed, where sin was heavy, not casual. Comment, "I choose Jesus" again if your heart is responding. There are people here burdened by fear about the future, money, family, health, purpose. You smile, but anxiety has been your constant companion. Jesus says, "Why are you carrying what I never asked you to hold?" Worry does not prepare you for tomorrow. It only steals your strength today. Faith is not denying reality. Faith is trusting God in the middle of it. You don't need all the answers. You need obedience for the next step. And God only reveals the next step when you trust Him with it. I sense deliverance happening even now. Chains of guilt breaking, chains of addiction weakening, chains of fear losing authority, not because of words, but because the presence of Jesus is real. But deliverance requires agreement. You must decide you don't want the chains anymore, even if they feel familiar, even if they feel comfortable. Freedom requires courage. If you're ready to let go, comment, "Jesus set me free." Now listen carefully to this final call. Jesus is not asking you to be perfect. He is asking you to be honest. He is not asking you to fix yourself. He is asking you to come. Come with your mess. Come with your doubts. Come with your addictions. Come with your broken promises. Come with your fear. Today is not condemnation. Today is invitation. Today is mercy knocking. Today is grace reaching. Do not silence the conviction you feel right now. Conviction is proof that God still cares. If He didn't care, He would let you drift, but He loves you too much to leave you asleep. This is your moment, not tomorrow, not someday, now. Jesus is calling you home. The night did not change when you finished listening. The room stayed the same. The silence stayed heavy. But something inside you shifted and you knew it. You lay there staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in a long while, you weren't running from the voice anymore. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was steady, and it said your name the way only Jesus says it, without accusation, without disappointment, without distance. You tried to ignore it. You rolled over. You reached for distraction. But the weight in your chest grew stronger, not heavier, clearer. Because when God speaks, He does not compete with noise. He waits until you are tired of running. There was a memory He brought back, not to shame you, but to show you where you stopped trusting. A moment when you prayed with fire. A season when obedience felt alive. And then something broke. A prayer unanswered, a loss unexplained, a betrayal you never saw coming. That was the moment you didn't walk away loudly, you walked away quietly. You still believed in God, you just stopped believing He would come through for you. If this feels like your story, pause and comment, "Lord, I am listening." That night you whispered words you hadn't spoken in years, not polished, not spiritual, just honest. "Jesus, I don't know how to come back." And heaven did not respond with instructions, it responded with presence. You felt it before you understood it, a warmth that didn't rush, a peace that didn't explain itself, a conviction that didn't crush but clarified. Jesus was not asking you to relive your failures. He was asking you to release your control. You had built walls out of self-protection and called them wisdom. You had numbed your hunger and called it maturity. You had learned to survive without surrender. But survival was never the promise. Life was. There was a door in your spirit you had locked years ago, not because you stopped believing, but because you were afraid of being disappointed again. Jesus stood there patiently, not forcing it, not knocking loudly, waiting for permission. "Let me in," he said, "not to your house, but to the places you never let anyone see." If you want him back in those places, comment, "Jesus, come in." The next days felt strange, not dramatic, not emotional, but honest. You noticed conviction returning, not as fear, but as clarity. Things you once tolerated now felt heavy. Words you used casually now felt wrong. Relationships you justified began to expose themselves. Holiness wasn't making you uncomfortable, compromise was. And that scared you, because change always does. You realized how much of your life had been shaped by avoiding pain instead of pursuing truth. How often you chose comfort over calling. How easily you lowered the standard so you wouldn't have to rise to it. Jesus did not shame you for that. He revealed it so he could heal it. One morning, alone, you felt him ask you a question that shook you. Do you want me, or do you want relief? Because relief fades, but surrender transforms. You knew the answer cost something. Old habits, old excuses, old versions of yourself that felt safe but kept you bound. Freedom always costs what bondage demands you keep. If you are willing to let go, comment, "I choose freedom." Then came the resistance, not from the world, but from within. Your mind reminded you of every failure. Your past replayed like evidence. The enemy whispered, "You've tried before, you'll fail again." But Jesus spoke louder, not with volume, but with authority. "My strength is not proven by your perfection, it is revealed in your dependence." You stopped trying to fix yourself. You stopped promising you'd do better. You simply stayed. Stayed in prayer even when it felt quiet. Stayed in obedience even when it felt costly. Stayed in truth even when it exposed you. And something began to break. Not suddenly, not violently, but deeply. Chains don't always fall with noise. Sometimes they dissolve when light stays long enough. You began to notice peace returning, not the kind that avoids storms, but the kind that stands in them. Joy reawakening, not loud, but steady. Hope reawakening, not naive, but anchored. Then God brought people back into your life. Not all of them, only the ones aligned with who you were becoming. Some relationships faded, others strengthened, and you learned that loss is not always punishment. Sometimes it is protection. If you trust God's pruning, comment, "I trust your process, Lord." There was still one thing left, the thing you avoided thinking about, the wound that never healed, the night it happened, the words spoken, the trust broken. You told God you forgave, but forgiveness was incomplete because you still carried the weight of it. Jesus did not rush you. He walked you back gently. He showed you how bitterness had disguised itself as strength, how silence had become your defense, how pain had shaped your identity. "You are not what happened to you," he said. "You are who I say you are." And for the first time, you wept without holding back. Not because it hurt, but because you were finally safe enough to feel it. Healing didn't erase the memory, it removed its power.
That was the day you stood up lighter. That was the day your voice sounded different when you prayed. That was the day worship felt real again. If God is healing old wounds right now, comment, "Thank you for healing me, Jesus." Now hear this carefully. What God restored in you was never meant to stop with you. Your pain was not wasted. Your silence was not ignored. Your waiting was not empty. You were being shaped into a voice, not loud, but true, not perfect, but surrendered. There are others like you, tired believers, quiet doubters, wounded worshipers, and your obedience will reach them. But the enemy knows this, and he will try again. He will tempt you with comfort, distract you with busyness, convince you that private faith is enough. But Jesus is calling you higher, not to fame, not to performance, but to faithfulness. You don't need to do everything. You need to do what he asks. And when fear rises again, and it will, remember this.
The same Jesus who called you back will keep you standing. This is not a moment. This is a return, not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be. If you were choosing Jesus fully, comment, "I belong to you." Now stay here for a moment. Don't rush, don't scroll. Let this seal in your spirit. Jesus is not done with you. He never was, and the story you thought ended has only just begun. The morning came, but you were no longer the same person who woke up. Something had settled inside you. Not excitement, not emotion, but resolve. The kind that doesn't shout, but doesn't retreat either. You noticed it in small moments, when temptation knocked and you didn't answer immediately, when fear whispered and you questioned it instead of obeying it, when your prayers stopped being rushed and started becoming real again. This was not hype, this was alignment. But hear this truth clearly. Every return to Jesus is followed by a test. Not because God doubts you, but because the enemy knows what you're becoming. Old voices tried to come back. Old thoughts tried to reclaim space. Old patterns waited for weakness. And for a moment, you felt the pressure, not to fall, but to compromise, to soften your convictions, to delay obedience, to settle into a version of faith that looks alive but costs nothing. That is when Jesus spoke again. Not softly this time, firmly. You didn't come this far to go halfway. If that sentence just pierced your heart, comment, "I will not turn back." You realized something then. The greatest battles are not fought in public. They are fought in decisions no one applauds. When you choose truth over comfort, when you walk away even though no one sees, when you obey even when it costs relationships, habits, or plans. This is where destiny is decided. God was not just restoring you, He was repositioning you. You started to see clearly how distractions had delayed your calling, how busyness had replaced intimacy, how knowledge had replaced surrender. Jesus was not asking you to do more. He was asking you to come closer, because proximity changes everything. When you stay near Him, discernment sharpens. When you stay near Him, sin loses its appeal. When you stay near Him, fear cannot dominate. You understood now. The fire you asked God for was never meant to entertain you. It was meant to purify you. If you desire that fire, comment, "Burn away everything not from you." Then came the moment of decision, not dramatic, not emotional, but eternal. Would you live this faith quietly again, or would you stand, gently, humbly, but unashamed? Because silence in the face of truth is agreement with deception. Jesus said, you don't need a platform to be a witness, you need obedience. And obedience doesn't mean perfection, it means availability. Your yes mattered more than your resume. Your surrender mattered more than your past. You were never disqualified. You were only delayed by fear, and fear just lost its authority. If you are choosing obedience over fear, comment, "Here I am, Lord." Now listen carefully as this message comes to a close. This is not an ending, this is a commissioning. What you received here is not meant to stay here. Faith grows when it is fed. Fire stays lit when it is surrounded by flame. Isolation weakens resolve, but staying connected strengthens conviction. If this message awakened something in you, don't walk alone. Stay connected to words that sharpen you, convict you, and pull you closer to Jesus. If you want to keep receiving messages that call you deeper, challenge your faith, and keep you aligned with God's voice, subscribe to this channel now. Not out of habit, out of hunger. Because the journey doesn't end here, and neither does what God is doing in you.